Blue Man Group, take one. Take two.
And so we think especially about how we started, basically just, the three of us saying, why don't we get bald and blue and do stuff.
Truthfully, the first thing the Blue Man Group ever did as an organized group of people was write a press release, which is why I always think the conversations about if we do too much marketing or if we're overly relying on marketing, I think is so funny because we were marketing from the first moment of our existence. And so they sent out this press release, and it must have been a slow news day because Kurt Loder picked it up.
They called it a funeral for the 80s, and as you can see, it was an art event. It was mounted by a collective of New York artists who call themselves the Blue Man Group.
There was nobody there. If you did anything in Central Park, you would attract a couple of passerbys who would stop and just watch you for a few minutes.
I thought it was a good idea and somebody needed to do it.
But the way they shot it, they made it look like there was this huge event, and they made it look like there were hundreds of people there. So it worked out. It must have been a slow news day for MTV. I'm not sure.
In the history of Blue Man, there's one thing that does kind of ring home with me is I kind of started as a street performer and working in street theater, guerrilla theater, when I was a youngster in the early days of my theater career. The fact that Blue Man kind of comes from that as its roots really appeals to me. It's a lot about what, I liked about theater in the first place.
We sort of got to go way, way back to when it was just the three of us, and then we started adding, and there was a lot of the early days gets romanticized, like, oh, those good old days, and some of them were good, but a lot of them were really sucky. And, you think back to King Tut's Wawa Hut, for example, in 1989. It held 45 people. It's not there anymore. It was on 7th Street and Avenue A. It was not sold out.
Phil made a vortex machine out of a washing machine, the first one, and it leaked everywhere.
It did. And then he fixed it. He fixed it 4 times.
We used to use it theatrically in the show to make Jell-O. We would pour, we had an oversized box of Jell-O, and we would act like we were pouring Jell-O into the top of it. It was really dyed, so it would change in color. I would turn a valve, and it would go out of that. It would look like it was going into this Jell-O mold, and people actually bought it sometimes.
We had one particularly kind of dead moment in that Wawa Hut show, which was we took, for the first time, the rolls of paper, and we unrolled them and wrote text on them. And then we re-rolled it, and then we held them.
And 3 different rolls.
And we were just going to push the rolls out a little bit at a time, but what happened was they just started going on their own, and it went faster than anyone could read. And so everyone in the audience was just going like this, and there was no music. And but that was the birth of paper rolls. Eventually, about 10 or 20 iterations later. So it's interesting.
And that was the show that a guy that Chris and Phil worked with in catering came up to us at the end of the show and said,
we asked him, did you like this? What'd you think?
Yeah, he said, you guys are brave.
I also really dig the fact that Chris, Matt, and Phil kind of started out this little company as kind of like just this little theater company that could.
A theatrical experience, a unique theatrical experience that has to do with, let's see, kind of Jell-O and Captain Crunch and virtual reality and chaos theory and and 3 blue men. Do not adjust your set.
Many things that I can point to at Blue Man had tremendous influence on the way that myself and Chris and Phil looked at how we wanted to have the organization be and how we wanted it to all kind of flow.
It's a strange place.
Certainly one of the things was the fact of having done about 1,300 shows in a row. It definitely puts into your head a certain way of how you want shows to run and how you want it to be on stage and off stage.
The show is entitled Tubes.
It was just, what else are we going to call it? And you know, you have a deadline for when you have to have a title by.
Because it has to get printed in the playbill and all the ads.
Right, and usually you're working on other things that are more important. So you have about 5 minutes to come up with the title, and you go, Tubes?
Look around.
Okay.
Chris and Phil were waiters before they got blue.
Hello. Chris and Phil used to take one of our goods, which is the crepe and cheese. Basically a crepe that is wrapped in blue cheese, and they used to throw it on each other and catch it with, with the mouth wide open.
These skills would later prove useful in the theater.
Tonight, meet Blue Men Group. From deconstructionism to Cap'n Crunch cereal, Blue Man Group has had a lot to say about the culture we live in. What was the operative idea when you began?
We didn't want to sit around waiting for some agent to discover us, we just wanted to go out. We had some things to say, we had some things we wanted to express, we didn't know how to do it, and we just did it.
Why blue rather than red? Or why blue rather than yellow?
Well, I think Chris really had this initial image of this bald and blue character. Right. It was afterward that we thought, well, red and yellow, all these other colors kind of have other kind of baggage associated with them, and blue is like earth.
I think early on, the show was sustained for the first 6 months just on word of mouth. And people were coming to the show, but it wasn't until Regis and Kathy Lee came to see the show and loved it.
They're covered in blue, and their faces are in blue.
We performed on their show, and not only that, Regis got involved in the, we did paint and cheese. He got involved and got excited about it, and I think that at that point he sort of made it okay for the rest of the world to like this sort of weird and mysterious thing known as Blue Man Group. So they put us on the map.
A couple of months ago, we had a performance on the show in New York, Blue Man Group. I asked them if they could bring me a little token from their show in New York City, and this is what they brought me. And I understand they had a crazy time getting it here. They made a tape. We got that. Let's take a look at the tape. This is them bringing me the Jell-O.
I found it interesting in terms of Blue Man history and milestone, how many shows Chris, Matt, and Phil did before anyone else was introduced to the part. I thought that was really interesting just to see how long they were able to just do it on their own before they realized, hey, we can paint other people blue and train them and teach them what we do.
I had been playing drums in the show for a couple of years before Phil hurt his thumb in an accident involving a power tool. After 2 years, I was going to go on. I had made lots of preparation for it. Joe McGuire, one of the stage managers, would help me out every couple of weeks. We'd run through the show or walk through it. And eventually, I got the call and I was going on, and I got all bald and blue. But Phil ended up going on anyway that night. It wasn't until the next day that I went on after Phil had gone to his doctor, who informed him, I believe, that he shouldn't go and do a show with a busted up back.
The way things were, when I started as opposed to how they are now, artistically I don't think they've changed much. I think artistically they're still the same goal. Organizational-wise, it's definitely, obviously has changed. We went from a little small basement theater over at Astor Place to a worldwide, corporate type of show.
Boston opening was huge because beyond that, it was just New York.
When we opened in Boston, and at that point, I would have said when they opened in Boston. So I had been involved in theater in a number of years, and I thought these people were flat out nuts. They did things in their own way. They didn't do what standard theatrical models looked like. They didn't look for standard theatrical anything, from design all the way down to where you get your PAs. I thought they were absolutely flat out nuts.
When I came on was a really transitional time for the company. It was right before we were opening Chicago, and it was all about templatizing who we were, you know, creating a handbook for the very first time. I was coming on to create an HR department, which was very controversial. People didn't know where I fit in and were worried that function was taking away from other people's responsibilities. So it was this weird mix of good and bad, yet at the same time seemingly symbolic of corporatization and becoming some sort of scary beast, or, you know, something different than this family type environment that we had been. About a year in, I think people really saw more of the value and help, and I understood my place within it too, which was great.
The real turning point for me would have been in December of '96 when we went on this retreat down to this plantation in Florida, White Oak, and we hired some consultants to come and talk to us about and help us talk about what we needed to do to become a company and help us decide what kind of company we wanted to become. And that was the moment at which we started to spend time thinking about mission, vision, values, to start thinking about corporate structures. How did we want our company to run? To start thinking about evaluation, roles, job descriptions, all of these things, benefits. All of these things didn't exist. There were just loads of baskets full of problems. So going to White Oak was really for me, the big moment at which we decided, and we accepted the fact that we were going to build a company and decided to embark on that journey of, you know, creating that.
Chicago was really interesting because it was the first time that we had developed such a great group of people working here. All those people were itching to sort of put everything that they had learned to use on opening a new production, and there was a real excitement about, you know, expanding, influencing a new city, and in some ways doing even better on the new production. That was the first time, I think, that in some ways the organization as an entity living outside of Chris, Matt, and Phil made a strong case for and was able to actually make something happen. And that's, for me, when Blue Man Production really started in and of itself. Actually went out there, did it, was more successful. I think a really seminal moment.
An incredible performance by Blue Man Group. You have to, these guys are unbelievable.
When we did The Tonight Show in Chicago in 1998, that was really fun because that was our first big outside gig. Now, today, when Blue Man Group does outside gigs, it's so organized and everybody knows what everything is. But at that point, we didn't really know what we were doing.
Have a seat. Have a seat, Blue Man. How are you?
When you get on, you have to realize that Blue Man is always evolving, and the music's changing, and you're going to get on at a point in the journey. You just have to realize that whatever you think that the Blue Man music is, it's like, it's not a set thing. It's more fun to go into the new territory.
They purchased 3rd Street in 1997 as a place to create new work, new music, really as a lab space to develop new instruments and new inventions, shoot videos, a place that would really be dedicated to playing and the creation of new work. The first thing I did there, it was the August 17th show. It was right after the creative development department was created. That space became dedicated to creating new work for Vegas. We knew that we had to take the existing show and redesign it and add to it so that it could play to a house, you know, that was more than twice the size of any house we had before. In that period of doing the August 17th show, that's what we called that show, as a mini show of new work for Vegas. We used the space to, you know, write new music, to design new costumes, the evolution of the electric light costumes, the first live wire wall, teched and really created the shadows piece. Audio was made, and I think the same kind of things keep happening there.
The decision to make an album was pretty big, our first album, Audio, because that is something that people have been asking. Is Blue Man ever going to do that? Is that, you know, why don't you do that? Isn't there a recording of the show? We love the music.
There's certain additional instruments that we've never been able to fit in the theater that we could do in a recording situation. We had this space here where we try to come up with new instruments and do research and development, and some of them just aren't going to fit in the shows, and we developed quite a number of them that are either too big or whatever. And so it was nice when it came time to record the album to be able to present some of these things that couldn't fit in the shows. And then after we were done with the album, actually, right after that, that was sort of what led to us wanting to go to Las Vegas, because that theater could accommodate these instruments as well.
When the concept of doing a show in Vegas came about, the guys got together and said, let's try out some of these new ideas, these new visual ideas, a bigger band, more drummers, community building, audience, Blue Man band experiences, and so they came up with a bunch of new material. We need to have a theater and a stage that's big enough to do this involving new material. We got to do Vegas.
So many of the things now when we open a show, it's built on either sort of the Rewired show or the Vegas show. And when we were doing the Vegas show, we had never done anything of that scale. It was a lot of new material. The music was really different. And I mean, it was just so incredible seeing the band just rolling with everything. You know, I would kind of sub in and play with them, but really the point was for me to not play, and the other people who were music directing it, and just throwing stuff at them and having them, you'd be like, okay, we did it this way last night, we're going to do something completely different, and although it's the same piece of music, everything you know is out the window, and just having everybody go with it and roll with it, and seeing all the tech come together. And for me, that was probably, you know, it was definitely the most intense part of my time here.
The Intel experience was sort of like that. It was a huge shift. It made us grow overnight from here to here in terms of our exposure, in terms of our experience, in terms of the knowledge, introducing Blue Man to the hugest number of people imaginable, committing to that, making the decision to go there and do a ad campaign was a huge shift for Blue Man. There was a lot of skepticism. There was a lot of excitement. What are we doing? And if the commercials are good, then it's only good for Blue Man. And the commercials were great. We had complete creative control. We did the music. We just had this incredible learning experience making the commercials from a production and a creative point.
Blue Man Records actually started before I actually started. And since I started, there's been no one else hired by Blue Man Records. Audio came out in '99, and I was hired in February of 2000. So it sort of marked a new direction that the company was going in, and you know, A, by releasing a record, 2, by signing with Virgin Records, hiring someone to help oversee that operation. was huge, and that was all sort of new ground being broken. And it really marked another step being solidified as a creative entity. And then a year later, we actually got nominated for a Grammy. So it was a pretty huge step for us, and we fortunately got a very immediate stamp of approval.
And then around 2000, we did Giant Rock Festival in DC, a huge stadium tour. All these like super hardcore bands like playing, and then Blue Man, it was kind of like a last-minute addition. The show was an absolute disaster. It's really affected the way they approach things creatively, and then from a production standpoint, it totally affected the way that, because we came in, we had like a bunch of cardboard boxes and some like plywood, cases and things like that, and like, and everybody else had these like slick road cases and everything, and we were like kind of looking around, we like felt very, like theater people.
It's hard to identify the moment where we decided that we wanted to enter the rock concert world. So it was probably like a desire that was always underlying, but it got more and more traction behind it over time. I think doing audio, and then the Grammy nomination for audio sort of gave us credence in the music world, and sort of put some fire behind it. Like clearly there's a rock kind of sensibility about our work. It also was the opportunity to give Blue Man a voice through the lyrics, and not have the Blue Man speak, and not try to have the LED signs do all the work for the Blue Man, but an opportunity to really put some stuff out there verbally, which opened up the door to work with a lot of different artists and work in that rock arena. And it did well, people loved it, sort of iterating on it with the Complex, and then finally now with Megastar, just furthering that story of the Blue Man exploring the rock world. It seems to be working out pretty well.
2001 was a big year for us because at the beginning of the year, it was very positive. We purchased the Astor Place Theater as well as the 2 buildings that came along with the purchase. So we finally had the sort of fate of the New York production more closely in our hands. We had much more control over it, which was fantastic and sort of a very exciting development, I think, for that production. But September 11th of that year obviously had a huge impact on the organization, obviously initially emotionally, and dealing with that as an organization spread out over several cities. But then really it had a huge business impact. We really, for the first time, I think, saw the vulnerability of the organization and what it means to be in the entertainment business, or a business built on discretionary income. It really impacted us on several different levels, actually. Just business-wise, financially, re-looking at how we operated, creating a business vision, really, for the first time.
I think that probably the most profound moment was after September 11th. Our company was not impacted by the tragedy, but our city was greatly impacted, and the world was greatly impacted by it, and our show. And so the first night that we had a performance, I think it was 2 days after everything had happened, and we knew that there was probably not going to be a lot of people coming into the show. But we decided to go on with the show because we felt like it was the right thing to do. It was people are looking for some kind of connection. They're looking for something to get their minds off of what just occurred. So the first night we had a candlelight vigil out in front of the theater. Then afterward we put the show on, and I actually sat up in the balcony here and watched the performance the entire way through. And it just moved me. We were doing something for the people who had chosen to come out that night. It was just emotionally, it meant a great deal, and it just really made me feel like we were having an impact.
September 11th also really made us look at the trajectory of the company in a different way. We really needed to, we realized it was at that point in time too, we really needed to sort of diversify the different types of things that we were working on. And I think it was at that point in time was really the initial thoughts for that in some ways. In some ways that goes back to the beginning, but really at that period we realized, because there was such an impact on all of our productions in North America, I think really the seeds of, okay, let's really start thinking about internationally. How could we be diversifying so we're not solely dependent upon income coming from one source, so that if we have to weather periods, we can sort of balance, you know, have a more even-keeled balance, and be spreading sort of some of the places where we draw resources from out a bit more.
We opened our show in 2004 at the Big Theater in Berlin. This was the first time that we were going outside of the United States, and the first time that we entered into a partnership relationship. So what that means for Blue Man Group is that we provide the artistic content of the show, the design content of the show, but the productions themselves are financed and managed by a local partner. In this particular case, Berlin was the first of 5 productions that we signed on, contracted to do with Stage Entertainment. Stage Entertainment is a multi-territory entertainment company which is based in Holland. So we provide shows for them in many of their territories. We have productions in Berlin, Oberhausen, Germany, London, Holland, and we're about to open Japan at the end of this year in Tokyo.
Opening international productions has been a really interesting step for us, because up until this point we had been doing everything ourselves, and when we reached the moment where we wanted to open overseas was the moment that we brought in partners to help us do it. And that was a huge step for us, because otherwise up until that point we had pretty much done everything internally, and we'd had partners in various things, but we really kept a lot of control over these things. So it was a big step for us to do that. It freed us up, because it meant that we could continue to expand without us having to expand as a company. This allowed us to expand more quickly without that same level of shock to our corporate system, if you will. The second thing is it forced us to condense our work down to the themes that were really important, because the themes will translate, but the methods to getting those themes across don't always translate. So it forced us to really condense it down to its bare elements, so that you could then expand it out again to match up with whatever culture you're going into.
But Berlin really changed us. And it changed us because it was the first time that we really had to deal with an outside organization on a day-to-day basis and expose our employees to it, and expose our employees to their value system, and need to grow. Berlin changed us because it exposed us suddenly on a continuing basis to somebody else's ethical system.
We are continuing to develop and roll out the European model. I'm imagining that Germany, which is right now the most successful territory in the world financially for theatrical productions, I'm imagining that Blue Man Group will be in Germany for many, many years to come.
When we got our partnership with Stage Entertainment and realized that we could be opening as many as 3 shows a year in different parts of the world, we knew that we would not have the time to redesign and rewrite that show for every 3 times a year for all different locations. In that period before Berlin, we focused on designing, a show for a smaller venue and the show for a larger venue. Smaller venue like London, Toronto, larger venue, Vegas, Berlin. These 2 shows became show templates that we would then, depending on the size of the market and the size of the theater, we would put that version of that show in with some things that we could change, like rewrite the opening signs specific to, for jokes specific to that country. We do a live wire wall with images specific to that country. There were certain things we could do to make the show, special for each area.
I'd say that a milestone would be, the move to this Institute the Venetian, because it really put a new spark into who we are and what we do here. After 5.5 years at the Luxor, we were ready.
About Toronto, ultimately the length of the run was not as satisfying as we had hoped it would be, but the theater was amazing, the show was amazing, the staff was amazing. I'm just so wildly proud of that show. The climate was not primed for Blue Man, not well primed, ranging from the theatrical climate in general to some political issues, but I'm really proud of the show. The development of the work, because that's where we really honed in on the new small show. I don't know, we had a great time. And and we learned a lot organizationally.
The next one up for us is Japan, which is very, very exciting for us. We've been wanting to find a Japan partner for a long, long time.
The development of the larger show and the smaller show, and getting those shows to the place where we feel like they're good enough to put in any market in any country has freed up our creative resources and time to be able to work on all kinds of new projects and work and really delve into new mediums.
And then around 2000, we did Giant Rock Festival in DC, a huge stadium tour, all these like super hardcore bands like playing. And then Blue Man, it was kind of like a last minute addition. The show was an absolute disaster. It's really affected the way they approach things creatively. And then from a production standpoint, it totally affected the way that, because we came in and we had like a bunch of cardboard boxes and some like plywood, cases and things like that, and like, and everybody else had these like slick road cases and everything, and we were like kind of looking around, we like felt very, like theater people.
It's hard to identify the moment where we decided that we wanted to enter the rock concert world. So it was probably like a desire that was always underlying, but it got more and more traction behind it over time. I think doing, audio and then the Grammy nomination for audio sort of gave us credence in the music world and sort of put some fire behind it. Like clearly there's a rock kind of sensibility about our work. It also was the opportunity to give Blue Man a voice through the lyrics and not have the Blue Man speak and not try to have the LED signs do all the work for the Blue Man, but an opportunity to really put some stuff out there verbally, which opened up the door to work with a lot of different artists and work in that rock arena. And it did well, people loved it, sort of iterating on it with the Complex, and then finally now with Megastar, just furthering that story of the Blue Man exploring the rock world.
I think it's really neat to keep putting Blue Man in unusual spaces where you don't know what to expect. I think that if you just were to put Blue Man always in a comedy club or something, and you're like, okay, so, entertain, amuse me, be a clown for me. That's a challenge. I think we like living in that space where you're not sure what to expect, you're not sure what the rules of the game are. It's really great to do something educational genuinely while you're there. That'll be interesting to explore.
We did the Children's Museum exhibit, which is finishing up year 1 right now and is on a 3-year tour of the United States.
I can't say that we envisioned a school, but I can say in a very real way there was a focus on education before there was even a Blue Man, because I think the inception of this whole project had very much to do with a kind of a human curiosity and almost a celebration of that curiosity.
We now have so many creative resources, and we have creative time, and we're expanding our pool of talent and resources and the support system, which is allowing us to move into doing work that isn't Blue Man character specific. We're working on books and collaborations with other artists, musical artists, designers, scoring music for movies and video games, and creation of new instruments and new costumes and all kinds of new inventions that are inspired by the Blue Man, and all the work we've done being built on, resting on the work that we've done, but then going out beyond.